Hello everybody. Today I'd like to talk about the building blocks for education in the 21st century, specifically with regards to middle school education. First, I'd like to talk about the premise of education and mass schooling. Education is defined as a social institution guiding a society's transmission of knowledge to its members. So mass schooling was first started for social conformity, to fill the labor pool of the state and nation, to help its members gain basic knowledge for job skills and cultural norms and values. Now, education is just one aspect of the many-sided process of socialization. Eventually, as schools grew larger, they became bureaucratized, where we needed to standardize and build routines in order to manage this behemoth. It involved formal operating and administrative procedures, and eventually it became more about how to give basic education to the larger population. Now, we all need to understand that education is more than knowing what's in the textbook. And also, there are different philosophies and different ways of schooling. For example, in the Eastern way of schooling, the teacher was the ultimate disseminator of knowledge. Nobody questioned the teacher's knowledge nor what was written in the textbook. In the Western system of schooling, teachers just sow the seeds of curiosity. The premise is that students should independently learn and discover more. The premise is also that one needs to question the teacher, evaluate the textbooks, understand whether they are accurate or whether they are propagating the author's viewpoint. And self-learning is the goal in order to build mastery. So the question I have for all of you is, how many of you foster the Eastern way or the Western way? Meaning, are you a believer of just propagating knowledge, where the student is this empty vessel that gains knowledge from textbooks and teachers? Or are you a proponent of the Western way, where we introduce concepts to the children, make them think about it, ponder over it, ask us questions, and slowly build their own knowledge? Now, let's look at current society and juxtapose that against the role of education. Society in the United States is multicultural. It's a very diverse society. And the society also practices diversity in many ways. We also know that there's diversity in parent characteristics. There's diversity within communities. There's diversity within the socioeconomic status, and there's cultural diversity. The way we live in the United States is somewhat segregated by town planning and segregation in terms of living. And what that does is it promotes insular living, and there's a lack of cultural intermingling. Within all that, there's also differences in philosophies and the communities. There's also differences in the skill sets and the exposure for each student based on where they live and the larger goals of the community. So here, amidst all this diversity, they all go to schools, and our current educational system is based on a one-size-fits-all. It was actually put in place in the early 1900s based on the goals of the Industrial Revolution. So having just heard what I said, I want you to consider this. Do you think the current educational system is supporting your needs or your child's needs? The National Blue Ribbon Award is given to schools that exemplify on various categories. The National Blue Ribbon Award category for public schools is quite different from the National Blue Ribbon Award criteria for private schools. The public schools are nominated by each state, And the criteria are that they must serve student populations with high percentage of students from disadvantaged backgrounds. And this might include economically disadvantaged students, that is, students who are eligible for free and reduced priced school meals, students with disabilities, students who are English language learners. And there are two categories under this: exemplary high-performing schools. So these schools must be at the top 40% within the state, and exemplary achievement gap closing schools. So these are the schools where they were identified as needing to improve, and if they show that they improved and got closer to the achievement gap, and if they qualified to be the top 40% within the state, then they qualified to be nominated. Now let's move on to the national criteria for non-public blue ribbon schools. So the national criteria for non-public blue ribbon schools is which applies to private schools. Now they must meet the following eligibility criteria. As you can see, their criteria are quite different from public schools. Exemplary high-performing schools. The achievement of the school's students, which means all students in the most recent years tested, places the school in the top 15% in the nation in reading and math as measured by a nationally normed test, or in the top 15% of its state as measured by a state test. And they should also submit disaggregated results for the student groups. And the graduation rate for non-public high schools must be 95% or higher in the most recent years. The reason for my bringing this up is, as parents, one needs to be informed about how there are different criteria for a lot of these awards as bestowed by the nation. Now let's look at this from a data perspective. So here are the scores of Cedar Hill Prep students versus the national public school scores and New Jersey public schools. Now you must understand that the nation holds proficiency as the benchmark for student accomplishment. Proficiency is out of a total score of 500, and proficiency currently is marked by having 50% out of 100. And advanced proficiency would be closer to 61% out of 100. And these are the two benchmarks that are used by most states, if not all states, as benchmarks for student assessment. Cedar Hill Prep School uses the Terranova Multiple Assessment Exam as their benchmark to measure students against not only students within the nation, but also what the Terranova Multiple Assessment is normed against. And there are international schools that participate in it too. And because it's normed against such a large group, it also gives Cedar Hill Prep an assessment of how their students do in a larger population. And currently, I would say that most of the students are in the top 6% of the nation, and the entire school is within the top 15% of the nation. So here the benchmark is mastery for Terranova, and it measures student knowledge, cognitive development and cognitive knowledge in 4 subjects: language arts, math, science, and social studies. Now, another important thing I wanted parents to think about is every institution has a vision and a mission. And then you need to benchmark that against student performance. So to give you an example of exactly what that means, here you have the vision for every Chicago public school. High standards, rigorous curriculum, powerful instruction. Systems of support that meet student needs. Engaged and empowered families and community. committed and effective teachers, leaders, and staff, and sound fiscal, operational, and accountability systems. I am sure all of you love hearing that. So do I. And their guiding principles are all about promoting every student's abilities. Now, it's important to understand that when you read about the vision and the mission, you also need to look at the end of the year, what your student accomplished. So now let's look at the current student performance in Chicago versus the state of Illinois. It's 36% relative to the state's 55% that exceed or meet the standards. So as you can see, the vision and the mission and the student performance have to all be aligned so that you can actually understand how it fits in. So this was just to show you that as a parent, you must be informed, you must reflect, and you must actually ask more questions to understand how it reflects on your child's education. Now, another very important aspect of American education. Many of the people who write policies, who are in leadership roles in DC, they tout the benefits of public education, but they all send their kids to private schools. As I remarked in my discussion, a couple of years back when we went for the debate nationals in New York City, we happened to be sitting next to parents from Sidwell Friends School, which is one of the most premier private schools that you hear about. It was interesting to see how many parents from there work in government who are responsible for educational policy and educational research that is used to guide public schools. So here are the people who write the policies, but they definitely seem to prefer private school over public school. You need to know that. So thus far I spoke about the National Blue Ribbon criteria, about the mission of a school and student outcomes. Now I'd like to talk about the differences in learning outcomes. In public schools, the goal is proficiency, 50% out of 100, in reading and math, especially in New Jersey. Now, if you live in Massachusetts or Texas, they actually measure students in all 4 subjects. So the goal of every public school is to make sure every student in the school meets proficiency. And if they don't, it's called the achievement gap. In order for the students to become masters or to do even better, to know more about every subject and strive towards it, it squarely lies on the shoulders of the parent. Parental involvement, parental knowledge, parental resources, their access and their willingness to invest in supplementary enrichment is all very important in order for a student in public school to strive towards mastery. One needs to understand the difference between skill development, which you get at the tutoring centers, and building knowledge. Knowledge has to be built to infer, to synthesize, and to critically think. And this requires good teacher educators and parent educators. In private schools, the goal is towards mastery. One invests in cognitive development tests like the Terranova results or the SSAT tests, which again look at the cognitive knowledge of every child, and students are tested on 4 subjects: English, math, science, and social studies. Since the goal is mastery, the curriculum is much more rigorous, and the goal is towards whole child development. Now, you do know that private school is by school choice. Therefore, parents opt to be in private schools. Therefore, the peer group is different because it's chosen by the parents who have the same values. And just by being with the peer group, peers influence other peers in order to strive for better or to have better goal setting trends. And in the end, you need to understand the 80-20 rule. 20% of the population takes the effort to understand the system, analyze what they're getting for their money's worth. 80% of the people are scared to be different and prefer to conform. But all I ask every parent is that learning outcomes for your child are very important. Please take the time to visit the nation's report card, to understand the different curriculums that are out there, to understand the focus of every school. What is their vision and mission? And is it towards mastery or is it towards proficiency? All these impact your child's education. Now, according to the World Economic Forum, the top 10 skills needed in 2020 are complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity. Now, you do know with all these three, they're not taught in school by textbooks. They need to be fostered. People management, coordinating with others, emotional intelligence. These require socio-emotional skills, opportunities to collaborate, opportunities for team building, and opportunities to interface with students from other schools. Judgment and decision making, fostered by extracurricular activities, service orientation, negotiation, and cognitive flexibility, which means the ability to be flexible, to negotiate, and to understand the bigger picture of what one's learning. Metacognition. As students get older, their metacognitive skills are supposed to be developed. They are supposed to think, notice, wonder, see, feel. And Carol Dweck's growth mindset is an extremely important mindset in order to build success. And for that, one needs to be able to reflect, is this really my best work? Mistakes are supposed to help one understand where we went wrong and help improve. The growth mindset, it has to be fostered in every activity. And it doesn't need to always be linear. Meaning, and what I mean by that is, one constantly assumes that life is linear. Life is not. We learn actually from our mistakes. So mistakes mean that you meet obstacles and so you don't progress like you imagine you should. But there's enough empirical research that shows that mistakes actually help you learn even better. So now I thought we should think about the following. Let's do a skills audit. The two skills that everyone needs to succeed in life that you learn in an educational institution is logic and writing. Do you see a lot of writing? Do you see a lot of activities, writing essays, writing reflective articles in the school? And how much do you foster those skills at home? Learning in the future involves networking, analyzing, collaborating, sharing, and publishing. Today, a lot of learning is using discussion posts. Students are expected to read articles and reflect on how it impacts them, compare different articles, synthesize what they get out of it. So it has become very collaborative. Statistics is becoming even more important, and therefore statistics needs to be understood as early as 8th grade. Now let's look at something that contradicts the mindset of many adults. The obsession with math and science. Here, I'd like to discuss how important social skills is along with being good at math. So there was this article by David Deming in 2016 talking about the growing importance of social skills in the labor market. And according to Deming, Being very good in math but having low social skills has the same probability of being ready for employment as low math and low social skills. In fact, the success of a person with low math, high social skills is just a tad less than someone with high math and high social skills. So, talking about collaboration, social skills are extremely important as one's cognitive abilities. And also, to be a leader in a field, one needs cross-disciplinary knowledge. While in school, we learn subjects as insular, meaning we learn English, math, science, and social studies as separate subjects. In real life, everything is cross-disciplinary. We live life whereby we see science, math, all interrelated. So, giving you a simple example as understanding the business of ethanol, it helps someone who has a broad-based understanding of it, from ecology, geology, economics, finance, climate change, environmental science. So knowing that, it's important to foster an interdisciplinary knowledge in each child. Interdisciplinary skills, knowledge of history, psychology, cognitive science, with computational knowledge, biology, neuroscience, physics, and chemistry are so important because new industries are constantly evolving, and also today's students are tomorrow's innovators. Life belongs to the best storyteller. So it's important to know how to represent this knowledge visually in the form of stories, and therefore social sciences and arts becomes equally important. And in fact, New York Times came up with this article just 2 days back, and I'm saying July 26th or so, 2019. And what they say is engineers sprint, but English majors endure. So what they say is the advantage for STEM majors fades steadily after their first jobs. And by age 40, the earnings of people who majored in fields like social sciences or history have caught up. As adults and as parents, we need to understand this. We need to foster what children like to do, their inclinations, because in the end, it is self-learning that actually governs success. So what they say is by age 40, the average salary of college graduates who majored in computer science or engineering seems to be the same as those who majored in social sciences and history, because many who do social sciences and history continue on to do management, business, law, and thereby their skill sets are developed over time. And the last thing I want to talk about is fear and anxiety. In today's world, we seem to hear so much about anxiety in young people. Anxiety has been measured even in students as young as 9 and 10. One needs to know as adults that fear and anxiety affect the brain architecture of learning and memory. Cortisol kills the cognitive abilities of the brain. So it's extremely important to make sure that students feel good, that students are raised in an environment of positivity. Because in the end, a healthy mind is extremely important to be happy and for them to be creative. Thank you for listening.